Hey lighting friends, David here from Learn Stage Lighting, and in this video I'm going to take this Lixada moving head and tear it apart and modify the fans. So this is obviously going to take me a couple days to do because I got to tear it apart first, see what's going on, see what fans are making so much darn noise, get some new ones, splice them in, and be ready to roll. So this is part one. Let's begin the teardown. So a lot of you guys expressed interest in this because these little moving heads, well, I looked at it and I looked at the quality of it and I said, it's okay quality, but I know there's quality control issues. And I heard back from a lot of you guys, and you guys said one of two things. Either, yeah, there's a lot of quality control issues. Make sure you have spare parts. Or other people said, no way, I've bought a ton of these and they're all perfect. Which tells me that, well, quality's a little inconsistent around these lights. So to dive in and get this thing to be quieter so it's not so stinking loud, let's change out the fans. If you are new here, you want to learn more about lighting, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to get started in lighting with a free guide. Awesome. So the first thing I'm going to do is start pulling screws out. I'm anticipating for this teardown, I'm going to need a regular Phillips head screwdriver, perhaps a flathead, and perhaps some Allen wrenches as well. But I don't think there's going to be any special tools needed. So let's just go ahead. And I've got this ratcheting screwdriver. I don't know if it's going to work. Nope, I need a standard Phillips. Phillips head screwdriver's in hand. Let's get to work. Somebody told me recently, too, to focus on making sure I look at the lens of the camera when I talk, and not the monitor that shows my not that pretty face to the world. So I'm just going to start with these screws on the main head, the moving part, because I think that's where the louder fan is, in the back of the head. There's a fan in the base too, I believe, and we'll get to that in a couple minutes, but I'm hoping that this is going to work like a lot of other moving heads, and I can just pull these first 4 screws out and be done with this top part. So now that we've got those 4 screws removed, we get inside of our head. Now we can see here a couple things. We can see right inside it's a pretty simple little moving head. So I see on the top I've got my LED module. It's got a nice big heat sink on it. I like that. Then at the bottom is our offender, the fan. And if we look at the inscription on it, we can see that it is 12 volts and 0.2 amps DC brushless motor. Okay? And the good news about that is, hey, simple 12 volt motor should be cheap enough to get a replacement. Now, part of the deal of why it sounds so loud actually comes down to the design of these grates. Any time that you put a grate in front of a fan, you're going to have noise, okay? It's minimizing the amount of space that the fan has to move, and, that's going to be something that slows you down. Now, on the fan itself, I don't see any specs on how much air it moves, etc. It might not matter that much, but just know there's no filter here, so any air that's I forget if it's being pulled in or pushed out, but if it's being pulled in, then you're going to see dust being pulled into the unit over time. And that's going to wear out the electronics quicker. Not a huge deal, but again, they're cheap. So if it's not getting, hopefully my hope is, and it looks like, it should be pulling air from the outside in. And if it's doing that from this vent, then I could put a little piece of filter in there and filter out the air. I'm not going to do that right now. Instead, I'm going to try to lose all the screws. And then, but if it's not doing that, and it's getting the air from the sides, there's really no way to cover this all and filter easily. The secondary offender, if I remember correctly, is that there's a fan in the base. And there's also a number of electronics in the base that we really would love to have better protected from dust. Because any dust buildup on the electronics over time, it's going to cause them to heat up, going to cause them to live a less fulfilled life. So let's get into the base. Taking a look here, Got some big old screws at the bottom. Yeah, I've got a base fan, and it looks like it's probably blowing out the bottom, which is probably why it's so loud, because it's just on these feet and it's so close to the surface. There's 4 screws on that from the outside. There's a number of screws from the inside. But I'm going to guess that I probably have to take the unit off of its base. Well, there's no screws on the top, which means I guess we're going to break into this thing from the bottom. So there are, on this particular unit, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 biggish screws. So I'm going to start with those. And what it looks like these are going to do, this is a little different than other moving lights I've worked on. What it looks like is that this is actually going to pull the sides off the unit, and the base is going to stay where it is, which, you know, is not a bad design. We'll see how easy or difficult it is to get to stuff once we remove these. This screw that I just pulled from the middle was really stubby. I don't think that's one I need to be removing right now. Alright, so, somewhat as expected, pulling those screws out has loosened this outer shroud. And so now I can get to the internal parts of this unit. It's connected to the control panel, which I could unscrew from the back side here and probably get that to pop out, but I'm hoping, yeah, I can gently wiggle this plug free and get that out. So now I see into the beast here. I see the main control board here. So this is going to be like all the really important stuff that runs the light and all the wires that go all the places. Doesn't look too bad. One of the capacitors on the circuit board is a little wonky looking, but it's not fried. And it kind of smells like cheap electronics, not gonna lie. So what we gotta do now is get to that fan on the bottom. And I see it in there. It's actually right here on the side. And so it looks like all we got to do is unscrew these screws on the base, these 4 that are right around the fan. It should pop up, and then hopefully we can gain access to it. Alright, so now we've got access to this fan. We see it's a 12 volt 0.1 amp fan. It's got a model number, so we can pop a picture of that and therefore look up what we're looking for and see if we can't find it. So what I really want to do is unplug this fan. Ideally, but if worse came to worse, if we can't find a plug for it or it's hardwired, we could always just snip the wires completely, but I bet we can find a place where it plugs in. It looks like it's just coming around all the way across the bottom here. Okay, so it does plug in on the circuit board that's like literally in the middle of the bottom of this thing. While we're here, let's remind you that if you're not savvy with electronics, if you don't feel comfortable opening something, please don't. There's dangerous electrical parts inside. But if you know what you're working with and you have things unplugged, it's, you know, not unreasonable to get into one of these things. So, I now need to access that center control board. But I want to do it without removing the pan and pulling all that off. I'm not sure how to do that. Alright, so it looks like if I remove these 4 screws that are in a square near the center, I might be able to get this board off and unplug this fan. We're going to find out. We got that guy unscrewed, and that gives us just enough wiggle room to get it out, which is great. Just what we were looking for. So at that point, we can unplug this motor right here. Fish it out from the other side. This looks like it's the power supply. It's got a big old capacitor on it. It's got a fuse, and it's got thicker wires going to the main control board. And there we have our fan out. So it's likely, we're going to go find the replacement fan here on the computer next, but it's likely that we'll be able to find something that's comparable to this, but it probably won't have the same plug. If that's the case, we'll just have to take the plug off, solder in the new plug, put it all back together, and see if this thing works. Now, what we didn't do yet actually was access the wiring for the one up top. So let's just put this guy back in how he was. How was he in? I don't know. I took a picture. Oh, he was in this way. His sled was side to side like this. Perfect. So now up to the top. Yeah, this guy has just got 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. It looks like I'm going to have to... Okay, 4 screws to get this cover off. Once I do that, I'll be able to reach... Yeah, I'm not going to reach where this fan plugs in. I'm going to cut this wire and splice a new one in. Awesome. So now that we've identified the specs on these fans, let's hop into the computer, find some replacement fans. I'm going to find the quietest and the highest flow kind of combo that I can so that I can get these guys replaced and report back to you on how it sounds.
So it turns out, at least on Amazon, finding fans wasn't quite as quick and easy as I thought it would be. But due to the fact that I didn't have a lot of specs for these, and I was trying to look for something that had good reviews in hopes that it would be more quiet, and I think I found 2. So these are the 2 fans that I found. One for the base, the bigger one, and the smaller one for up top. And now let's go ahead, hop inside, and splice these things in. All right, so in true fashion, we're going to move pretty quick through this because it's not that exciting. I'm taking the new fan. I'd pulled the old one out in the previous part of the video, and I'm just fishing it in. Turns out that the plug for the fan is the exact same plug as before. It is a standardized little 2-pin plug. And so all I got to do is just pop that guy in. I can tighten up the screws, and here in a minute, actually I'll fast forward to it now. We'll go ahead and we'll put that power supply and those other goodies back in because I had to pull that out. So I'm literally fishing my wire through so I can plug it in on that board. Boom. Now we're going to pop that board back in, tip the light over, line up the screws, and screw those in. After that, the very last step is just to put the cover back on the outside of the light. Pretty simple. Don't forget, of course, to re-plug in the display. And now's a good point, actually, to remind you that to always be safe with electrical things. If you don't know what you're doing or you don't feel capable, please do not tear apart electronics because they can be very dangerous. But if you do know what you're doing, you know the risks that you're taking, and it's something that is not out of reach for someone who's handy with electronics for sure. Awesome. Now we're putting the last couple screws in the base, so that's screwing down the outside to the base. And now let's go to the top fan. So the first thing I recognized is that I had to pull off the other half of the side cover of the head itself so that I could get access to all 4 screws. So there, I've done that. Now we're pulling out the 4 screws on this fan. And in a second here, we're going to see I'm going to cut the wires to it. And the reason why is simply because the wires for this fan are really long, probably longer than the fan that I bought. And they go down, as I just pointed, into the pan. They go into the side, the arm of the light. They go down, and then they go into the base. And truth be told, I didn't want to rip the whole light apart and have to fish that stuff through, so I'm stripping the wires. These are my Irwin Vice Grip automatic wire strippers. I got these a while back, and they're really cool for any type of wire that is not super rubbery. These things work awesome. You don't have to pick the right hole to line up for the gauge. You just use them, and they're a highly recommended tool. I'll link to them below for sure. So now we're getting that guy in. We're gonna just strip all those wires, solder it up, and then once we solder it up, we will be ready to go ahead, put the whole thing back together, plug it in, and see if this actually made any improvement or if this thing's just a bad wind tunnel design and, we're not going to get any good out of it. But hey, while we're here, those wisps of smoke from the soldering iron look awesome on camera. I just got to say that. Very cool. So, of course, putting some heat shrink on there on the 2 wires so that we can cover up the connection once we solder it. If you are a professional solderer, please don't critique my work because I know that I am not a professional solderer, but I am, decent. And so do keep that in mind. I'm not even going to get my heat gun out to do the heat shrink, but just soldering those guys together, putting on my heat shrink, going to melt that with the soldering iron real quick because it's small. And then we just got to put the thing back together, tuck the wires in neatly, and then we get to go in front of the camera and see if what we did actually did anything. So let's go.
All right, and drum roll, please. Do. Let's plug this in, see if it catches on fire or if it's quieter. Turns on. Yeah, this is noticeably quieter than it was before. Previously, if I look at the raw footage before I applied any noise filtering on the audio, this thing was so much louder. Let me actually grab a flashlight and make sure they're both running. Just to double, triple, quadruple verify, we've got one fan in the back. It is definitely spinning. One fan in the bottom is definitely spinning. And yeah, I notice both fans are definitely up to full speed now. It still isn't silent by any means. That's probably due to the airflow restriction in these vents. But just the fact that literally, comparing to the original video when I shot the review, catch that here, and now, I literally could not get usable audio off of this shotgun microphone right here while these fans were running. It was even really distracting to me talking. It's a much duller roar now, especially if you have a lot of these in a smaller space, whether it's a small room at a church or a small club or something. You might notice that fan noise. You know, you got an acoustic act in a small room, and it would be really obnoxious. But we've definitely, you know, without me having a decibel meter and sticking it to this, I can tell you that it's definitely become improved. It's definitely better. It's definitely not making as much noise, and everything still works. And so that is the most important part. So, hey, if you enjoyed this, if you liked it, let me know in the comments below, and especially let me know by hitting that like button. Be sure to subscribe here on Learn Stage Lighting, and check out everything else we've got going. This video was kind of an experiment. I don't usually do electronics repair and stuff like that on here, but I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments. And I will see you guys in our next video. Thanks.